All right, all right, all right. Here we go. We're just waiting. We're just waiting. I'm actually early this time. All right, well, it be what it be. Oh, man.
And now we'll see how good you are. No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Ready to work.
So it's been like forever since I did this, and I honestly thought I had this foolish expectation that I would have better muscle memory of like what buttons to press when and where, and I really goddamn didn't. Like I'm sitting here going, which one was next? What button came after that? I'm glad I got it sorted, but oh man, I've had to like slide everything like way closer so I can just like look. I'll get back on track, I know, but still. Good grief, it's been a while. It is so nice to be here. And it is so fantastic to sit back in the office, as messy as it is. I swear I did clean it. It was clean for 2 days. You didn't see it. But I swear to you, it was clean. Like, I vacuumed and everything. It was really nice. And then I proceeded to just fill it up with shit again. So, yeah. But all the same, here we are. We're back. We're doing more stuff. Tonight's one of those things where I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to start with a story because it's one of those topics that's really hard to kind of get around and get your head around. It is very nice to be here. I do really want to make that real clear. It's just wonderful to be back. It is nice to have a chance to sit here quietly. You'll see why in a minute when I start talking. But it's just nice to be here and do this stuff. So I want to start first with a mouthful of water, because if I don't, my cardiologist will yell at me. I promised him X number of glasses of water today. I've got 2 left. We're gonna do it. All right. Tonight we're doing voice. Now, this is one of those things that's been on the list of topics for like ever, maybe even since the beginning. And it is universally one of the most difficult and complicated things. And I don't want it to be. I don't mean it to be. It just sort of ends up being this very like swirly, twirly, abstract kind of thing. And I'm going to try and keep it simple. So I can't promise that this is going to be a 2-hour thing. This might be over in 45 minutes. I have no idea. But it's going to be useful for you. And whoever you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're writing, this is going to make a difference. I really can't stress that anywhere near enough, because voice is everything. Like, way more than you think, voice is everything. And I'm going to illustrate that with a story. So I took a couple weeks off, right? And it was supposed to be all about me, like, reconfiguring things and setting up I was going to move this table over there. You were going to get different light. You were going to look at a different side of the room. I was going to try and paint that wall back there. You know, I was going to have better lights come in, and I was going to sit down and really like figure out how to do this the way I thought it should be done. And as you can tell, none of that fucking shit happened. And what it left me with after like 2 days off, when I was swamped with a bajillion other things, what it left me with was this absolute sense of loss, this complete sense of like wandering around in the wilderness, not really knowing what to do, not really knowing how to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And it really it really sucked. Like it really weighed on me because I just didn't know how to do this. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't really happy with the way things were going. I was really tired of talking to like 0 people. And I was really tired of yelling at the wall or talking to a cat and then hoping upon hope that somebody somewhere would say something. I could not for the life of me figure out how to suddenly generate interest so that people would actually show up, so that people would either show up here in chat, hi chat, or so that people would, stick around and check out videos, or they maybe even pay $2 to the Patreon so that I could buy groceries. Something would happen. There had to be something I was missing. There had to be something I was lacking. And I thought I broke down everything. There's a hole somewhere over here. I think it's over here. Hang on. There's a whole like pile in a steno pad of all the things I thought it could be when it comes time to figuring out what I was doing and where I was going and what I wanted to do and how I was going to get there. This really broke me. Like I was driven to an existential crisis. And being me, and maybe you're like this too, as writers and creatives, you're busy checking out what the other people are doing just to see if, you're sort of on the right trail based on where everybody else is. So I checked out my competition, the other editors, the other coaches, the people who talk about editing, the people who talk about coaching. And I made the mistake. Oh, man, did I make a mistake? I made the mistake, and maybe you've done this too. But I made the mistake of absolutely paying attention way too much to them. Like I spent days on social media, mostly on Twitter, just looking at what they were doing and then going on their sites and clicking their things. I didn't sign up for shit, but just looking at what their work was, looking at how they were communicating with people, looking at what people were saying about them. And it made me envious and it made me angry. Because looking at what they were doing, looking at how they were explaining things, looking at what they were explaining overall, they weren't doing the same thing I was doing. I'm not meaning like, they're doing one, they're clearly doing apples and I'm clearly doing oranges. It's that they're not doing the depth. They're not doing nearly the dive on a single topic. They're hitting like 10 topics scatter, a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here and a little bit there. And they have this sort of pervasive, I called it niceness the first day, but I realized on the second, third, and fourth days that they're just mouthing. They're just tossing out buzzword salads and saying the things that their capitalist owners and masters want them to. They're playing the game. They're oh boy howdy, we're going to help you write, but we're not really going to make you a better writer, but we're going to, go through the song and dance. And it made me really stop and think about like everybody, like the majority of people, hundreds of people collectively have left 6 or 7 people a ton of reviews, and they're buying houses and they're getting cars, and they're not talking about how hard it is to feed yourself, and they're not sweating, like I got to lie to this company to pay off this bill so I can go over there and pay that bill. They're not talking about that stuff. They're not talking about like, oh gosh, the big treat of my day is that I get to have a can of Coke. Like they're looking like they're not necessarily living large, but they seem to be living well. And I wasn't. And I thought to myself, man, maybe that's because I'm not a nice person. I've said in a million places and a million times, I'm not a nice person. And hi, it's nice to see you. I'm not nice. Like, I'm not somebody who's going to walk a grandma across the street. I'm not going to, coddle you. I'm not going to pat you on the head. I'm not going to, hand you a pile of various emoji and GIF to indicate, how happy your joke made me on page 10. I'm going to tell you how to be a better writer. You're not always going to like me. I don't expect anybody to always like each other. That's kind of creepy. Because I just want you to be honest. I just want you to think. I just want you to have ideas and be able to express yourself so that I can have ideas and be able to express myself. And I spent some of my time off trying to sound like those people over there. Like, how would I change my language so that I sound like this? How would I, they seem to be making items number 1, 2, and 3 a big deal. So maybe if I made 1, 2, and 3 a big deal, then suddenly, like, I'd have less trouble paying my electric bill. I'd have less trouble buying cat food. I'd have less trouble, like, just getting through the day. And I rehearsed it. There were videos recorded. Like, I sat down with my laptop on my couch, and I recorded videos, and I recorded audio, and none of it went out because I deleted the shit out of it. But I tried sounding like everybody else. I tried to put together this presentation. Like, I did the verbal equivalent. Like, I wore a shirt with buttons, right? Like, I buttoned all my shit up and I tucked it all in. You couldn't see. I tried combing my hair 2 different ways. I was contemplating a haircut. I thought about trimming this way the hell down. Like, I really made an effort to try and play the game, thinking that, well, these people are by all accounts younger than me. They seem to be more successful than me. Maybe my time as a pirate on the margins of work has finally failed, and at almost at 45 years old, I have to kind of suck it up and understand, like, well, this is just how shit is. And I was all set to rebrand. I was all set to come up with different logos. I was going to stay the writer next door because I own that shit, but I was all set to, like, repackage and repurpose. And I sat there and I had a grape soda, as one really should every time there's a major life decision. Have some kind of, like, beverage. It really helps. And I sat there and I thought to myself, like, well, what if I didn't? What if I just one more time, just one more day, one time, didn't do this? What if I just waited a day? And there are dogs going, like, wild behind me. I have the windows open because it is no longer 95 in the office. So I apologize if there's, like, dogs and stuff. Oh, hang on. There's a question. I will get to that question, chat. I see you. I'll get to it. I will find a way to tie it into what I'm talking about. But just give me a minute. I'll get there. I see you. So I thought I'd give myself one more day. I thought I would absolutely positively figure out how to, this is how I'm going to answer the question. I thought I would figure out a way to package up and close one thing and open a new door. Go do something different. Go try something different. And I was all set to. And I thought, give me one more day. Because it was like a Thursday or a Friday when I had this. And the weekend was coming. I'd see how Saturday went. And if I was going to do anything big, I'd pat my hands and I'd make a big swing of it on Monday. And I was all set to sort of say goodbye to the me I was comfortable with and become this me that I thought I needed to be, to sound the way I needed to sound, to do the things I needed to do. And I'm really glad I took that day off, because I spent the day completely away from all social media. Completely, absolutely. I talked to actual humans in person and sat and ate good food and hung out. I didn't play any video games. I wasn't even really sitting on the couch too much. I was just engaging with humanity, something I hadn't really done in a while. And when they were talking to me about work and they were talking to me about, like, what's going on and how you doing with this and what's going on with that, I didn't tell them about the crisis I was having. I didn't talk to them about, like, well, guys, I don't really know how I'm going to make this work. Like, I told them money's tight, because money's tight again. But, like, I didn't talk to them in terms of, like, well, guys, I'm having this major existential crisis, and you don't really understand how my personal and professional identities have been blended over the last 15 years. And now it feels like every time I have some kind of hiccup in the road, it feels like my entire identity is collapsing. Didn't say any of that. Didn't come up with any of that at all. Just instead, they asked me, hey, if I wanted to write a children's book, what would I do today? Hey, we're going to have a baby. I want to produce a children's book. What do I need to do? Hey, do you remember the name of I went to school with some of these people. Do you remember the name of our elementary school English teacher in 5th grade who was, like, really mean to us? I did. She's dead. Her name was Rhoda. The only human being I know with the first name Rhoda, other than the television character. But we laughed about it, and I talked about writing, and it was it was me. It sounded like me. It didn't sound like buzzword salad over there. It didn't sound like I was trying real hard to, not offend anybody. I didn't sound like I didn't toe any party lines and tell you that, oh, what you really need to be doing is blah, 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 blah. No, it was just me talking. And I realized in that moment that what I was failing to do, what I was misunderstanding, and why tonight we're talking about voice is because I was misunderstanding voice. And that's what we're talking about tonight. That's the whole point of the story. Now, I know there's a question in chat, so I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here, especially audio people. I know you guys get on me for my detours, but bear with me. I'm going to answer this question right quick, and then we're going to steer back. So the best way to close a chapter, just end the scene. Just end the scene. Just end the scene. End the scene and move things forward. Like watching TV and realizing there's going to be a commercial break. Just end the scene, move things along. It's fine. It doesn't need to be extra setup. It doesn't need extra bits. Just end the scene. It doesn't need, because readers going to keep turning the page. They're wired to. We've trained them to. Just package up the scene. Make sure there's, if there's any cliffhanger, which should be infrequent, but if there's a cliffhanger, there's a cliffhanger. But by and large, just package everything up like I was ready to do when I misunderstood voice. That's how we tie things together, chat. I knew I was going to get there eventually. So I misunderstood voice. And I thought I had to be and sound like somebody else. When really what I like about this job, what I love about this job is that I get to sound like me. I don't use buzzword salad. I don't run a million different colors and glom onto trends. And talk about a billion trillion different things. I don't want to tell you what's popular. I don't need people to love me, as desperate for love as I might be in my life. I don't need a million people like chasing after me like I'm a rock star. And it would make me uncomfortable, frankly. I'd like a little bit of praise. I'd like a little bit of attention. Sure, I think anybody would. But by and large, when it comes to being me, I'm the best authority at me there is, just like you're the best authority at you there could ever possibly be, because you're the only you that's youing. That's not the word I want to use. You're the only one that's you out there. So there's a level of inherent authenticity that you should never compromise, that you should never give up, that you should never break down and trade for any amount of success or issue or anything. It's yours because that's you. Don't trade it for magic beans. I don't care how nice the bean sales pitch is. I don't care how desperate things might be when it comes to like, oh, I don't know how we're going to do this, or I don't know about that. That's fine, but don't trade who you are for this. And that's a level of voice, and that's a level of understanding what you're doing in your art and your creativity that I can summarize with a big giant graphic. You got to be who you are meant to be. Look at my big giant graphic. Isn't that lovely? So how does this turn into a thing? How does voice become one of the most misunderstood writing elements there is? Because if you go look up voice in writing, you're going to get a ton of kind of sort of inaccurate descriptions. Like, it's hard to, I'm going to sit for a minute because there's a cat sitting on me. You're going to get a ton of really variable. Wow, that's really bright all of a sudden. Let me turn that shit down. Oh, dial back. There we go. It was a great graphic. I'm really proud of that graphic. Well, when you go talk about voice, when you go ask about voice, you're going to find a million different definitions. They're going to talk to you about characters. They're going to talk to you about word choice. They're going to talk to you about sentence structure. They're going to talk to you about paragraph size. They're going to talk to you about marketing. They're going to talk to you about, your pen name for some stupid reason. They're going to talk to you about your place in your genre. You're going to talk about your comps, because everybody just really loves comps. I'm sorry, I have this weird, strange wrist thing that just tends to happen whenever I start talking about comps. It's this terrible thing. I've got to go see some kind of surgeon about it. So you're going to find a million disparate things that everybody swears is the actual answer to voice. And they're kind of right. In the same way that when we talk about, 72 Crayola crayons, we got to have 72 individual crayons before we can have the whole picture. Before we talk about the whole pizza, we got to make sure we get all the slices on the tray. It's the same kind of deal there. It's this idea that there's lots of different components to voice, lots of different pieces. And each of these things, not so much pen names or comps. Here goes my wrist again. It's just doing this thing like it's this really big deal. I just can't stop it. Every time I talk about comps, here comes this sort of like waving wrist motion every time. I swear I'm going to end up needing carpal surgery for it. Oh my God, it's terrible. So all of these definitions isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. It's just incomplete. So I want to give you, first and foremost, before we go any further, I want to give you one encompassing umbrella definition for voice that you can use everywhere except pen names and comps. Oh, there goes my arm again. It's just possessed. It's this crazy, stupid thing. Anyway, one definition, one unifying field theory when it comes to voice, right? Here we go. I wrote it down. That's how clear this is. Voice is how you broadcast your art. Voice is how you broadcast your art. That's it. That's it. Every one of those subordinate definitions, characters, word choice, paragraph structure, marketing, all the good stuff that you're supposed to give a shit about, fall under that definition. Voice is how you broadcast your art. So question number one to you right there, viewer of this, consumer of this, listener of this, if you're checking out the podcast feed. By the way, thank you, podcast people. And thank you, YouTube people. We broke 1,500 total views on the channel. I got like an email with a thing in it. It was really rad. And podcast people, like we broke the 300 download thing. And I got an email with a thing in it. I'm going to print it out and stick it probably on that wall. Where is it? That wall. I'm trying to figure out where my camera angle is. Like, that's rad. I've never done that shit before. This is great. But you got to be able to answer this question. How are you talking about your art? Not like, well, not but not only in terms of what words do you use specifically, but the tone, the style, the honesty, the authenticity, and the words, and the ideas. How are you broadcasting your art, whatever your art is, okay? It's significant. Because remember that story we started with where I was trying to be like all those other people? Are you doing that? Are you looking at what other people are writing and going, God, they seem to be knocking these books out left, right, and center. They seem to be selling this and doing that, and I'm over here like barely trying to hammer out like 10 pages. And these people are talking about like, oh, I'm going to get a 2-book deal. And, blah, 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 blah. And, everybody's whipping out some kind of like writerly genitals to measure. And it doesn't really make any sense because you've got the same number of hours in a day they do. And they're not doing half as much, but they seem to be doing twice as much with it. So how do you like sit there and reconcile that? That's the same position I was in. And it's all voice. It's all in how you broadcast your art. It's all in who you talk to, how you talk to them, what you own, what you deny, what you admit, what you thrill, what you embellish, what you undersell, how you describe, all that stuff. You start thinking about verbs, you start thinking about adverbs, they're going to come up in some point with voice because it's how you come across to whomever you're coming across to. Whether it's a pimp, whether it's a publisher, whether it's your friend, whether it's a consumer, whether it's that book club over there, whether it's those randos over here in this community, whatever, whomever, it's all voice. All of it. Every single bit of it. Now, we can break this down even further because, of course, it's the English language and there's enough architecture and bureaucracy in it to, like, fill buildings. But voice, we're going to break down into some pieces just for easier digestion, just so that we're not only limiting ourselves to the abstract kind of philosophical idea of, hey, you got to own your shit and be responsible. Because I know some people watching this really want that concrete, crunchy, dialed-in definition stuff. So let's do some crunchy, concrete teaching, shall we? I'm going to get another mouthful of water before my cardiologist yells at me. All right, let's go. So let's cover the voice stuff I've always covered because it's a nice starting point, okay? Ready? There's two kinds of what are called major voice. Don't worry about the major and minor. Just understand that there's voice, and it's mostly talked about in two ways. There's narrative voice and authorial voice. And if you understand just these two things, you're going to be fine. You're going to be super duper fine. You can go well and far and deep across the world in narrative and authorial alone, okay? It's fine. Narrative voice first, because it's the one you're probably most common with. That's how your book is written. That's your sentence structure. That's your word choice. That's the words the characters say. That's the words you use to describe things. It's all the decisions you make in your brain that get transformed into sentences and end up on the page. It's how the book reads. And it's the words you choose to make that book readable. It's the story. Now, we can get a little abstract here and talk about, it's way more up here first or way more in here first. That's brain and soul for the audio people. It's way more in the body and in the head before it hits on the page. We can go there if you want. It's reasonable, but not critical to make that distinction. But narrative voice is all about the decisions you make. Does that include it includes everything. Does that include dialogue? It includes everything. If it's words on the page, hey, it's all narrative voice. It's all narrative voice. Is it on the page? Narrative voice. If you really want to split it, like you need like a percentage of a percentage would make it feel better. It's mostly the prose, the exposition, as opposed to the dialogue, but it's still also involving the dialogue. Just the dialogue is kind of off to the side. But for the most part, if it's on the page, it's narrative voice because it's part of what gets the story across. You're just going to... It's like a 95-5 kind of split or a 90-10 split if you really want a percentage, but don't get bogged down in the percentage. Just keep it straight with, if it's on the page, narrative voice because the story's all there. Don't get hung up on narrative versus narrative versus expositive versus, dialectic. Story, narrative voice. Now that's going to come across in terms of your decisions. So that's your word choice, your sentences, your paragraphs, what sentences there are, what sentences you cut, how big the paragraphs are, how big the sentences are, how you punctuate them. All those little decisions, all those big decisions, all those panicky-inducing decisions when it comes time to revise, as well as just the you sitting down thinking like, how am I going to get this idea across? Type. All that stuff is narrative voice. And you can strengthen your narrative voice because everybody wants to know how to strengthen it. Nobody ever wants to talk about weakening. We're going to talk about weakening later. But everybody wants to know, how do I get a stronger voice? How do I get a clearer voice? How do I do this better? Look, you're going to do it better. You're going to get a stronger, clearer voice by doing the same thing. You're just going to keep making your book, making your next book, making the book after that, the one after that, however many you write, whether it's one or a billion. By making them as clear as possible to the best of your ability, draft after draft, page after page, line after line, word after word, you will eventually figure out how to write a book. And I know that sounds sort of frustrating to people who want I want a timeline and I want to know exactly how many days it'll take. And I want to know if I'm wasting my time because the window for you is, I can't give you anything like that. That's not how this works. Everybody talks about, the 10,000 hours. Look, man, I've spent 10,000 hours on lots of different activities. And it was never about the amount of time. It was about the amount of effort I put in. Man, I spent 10,000 hours screwing up my life. But the screwing up wasn't just the passing of time. The screwing up was the actions I did. So think about the concrete actions you're taking, the times you're writing, the words you're choosing, the things you're writing, and then delete, and then rewriting, and then trying again. All those things help build your voice. And in building your voice and strengthening your voice and making your voice more apparent, because there are more words on the page, because you've made more decisions, because you've got more stuff done, you will figure out how to do this. Now, whether or not you get better at doing it over time comes down to what sort of people and support you surround yourself with. Because if you're doing this all by yourself and you're just sitting there and it's like, oh, whatever it is, I'm just going to write this and live in a vacuum, it will take you longer to get better at it. How much longer? Who knows? Are pigs flying? Is it snowing someplace? It'll take you a while. But if you surround yourself with people and support and you get better feedback and get better tools, that window shrinks. And it gets easier to do this better, faster, if speed is really an issue for you. For some people, speed's not an issue. It's just a matter of, I want to get better at it, period. Well, this is how you do it. You just keep writing. You just keep making stuff. Clarity of narrative voice, because people want a strong voice and they want a clear voice. Clarity in a narrative voice comes down to writing effective sentences. And when I say effective, yes, audio people, I made air quotes, effective sentences doesn't mean short, punchy ones. It doesn't mean big, giant, long, crazy ones with commas and shit. It means the best sentence to do the job you're trying to do. So in this moment, in this paragraph, in this scene, in this thing we're talking about, whatever sentence best does the job you're trying to accomplish. Oh, I need to write a line of dialogue. I need to describe the tires on the car. I need to talk about how the gun goes off. I need to talk about the look in somebody's eyes. Whatever kind of sentence, whatever kind of fragment, whatever kind of words you can stitch together to make that happen, to do it to the best of your ability, that's the effective sentence, the sentence that does its job the best. Now, ideally, your effective sentence also tries its best to follow a number of rules of grammar and structure so that the reader can read the thing. But it's not necessarily incidental. But you want to put a premium on making sure you get the story across, and then sweat things like, oh, that's a radial sentence with 2 subjugations. Oh, that's a sentence without an like the hyper grammar and the hyper diagrammatic nature of things is not important. There's not going to be a quiz. There's no final. Just use whatever sentence or sentences you need to get the idea from your brain to somebody else's brain. Okay? Clarity. Don't hear the word clarity and think like brief, like bare bones. It's not about like, name that tune where it's like, I can name the whole song in one note. Great. Good for you. This is not about who can use the fewest number of words, just like it's not whoever can use the most number of words. It's about who can use some amount of words to do the thing we're trying to do. And you're going to do it differently than me, and you're going to do it differently than the person to your left, and they're going to do it differently than the person on the right, and so on and so forth. And everybody should do it differently, and everybody needs to do it differently, because we all have this ability to see things in different ways, and that's what makes art art. Clarity in voice is about the effectiveness of your sentences. How do you write more effective sentences? You make stronger decisions about what you're trying to say. You see the picture in your head, and you figure out how to articulate that onto the page. So maybe that means you're going to have to expand your vocabulary. Maybe that means you're going to have to practice writing sentences of different sizes. Maybe that means you're going to have to, really work on structuring your ideas and figure out what idea happens before what idea happens before what idea. Maybe that, there could be all different kinds of little bells and whistles, lots of different decision-making, crunchy gears that you're going to have to tweak and fiddle with in order to get that idea across. but it's in your power to do it. Even the people who I work with, who will forever be stuck in first draft hell because they're holding themselves back or they're trying too hard. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But even those people can learn to write effective sentences. You can be absolutely new at this. Day one, complete new. And you can learn to write effective sentences. And even if you've been doing this for years and you've been just kind of swimming in a circle, trying to get your book done, trying to get your stuff out the door, trying to figure out how to finish this thing, you can write effective sentences. You can communicate the picture in your head to somebody else's brain. It's not always going to be the most pleasant process in the world, but it's a functionally useful process, and you can get better at it. That's narrative voice. Okay? That's the first of several sort of like mile markers we're going to run in this voice-based marathon. I'm going to get more water. Next, we're going to do authorial voice, the voice of the author. This gets a little bit more abstract, so you're going to have to kind of ride with me a little. I promise I'm going to steer you through the rapids, and we're not going to get too like way philosophical. But we got to get there a little bit just so that this makes sense, because you can't really do authorial without talking narrative. Narrative is the crunchy stuff. Authorial's the swirly, twirly, artsy stuff. We're going to get there. Give me a sec. All right, let's go. Authorial voice is the voice of the author. If narrative voice is the voice of the story, it's the way the story comes across to the reader. Authorial voice is how the author comes across to the reader, whomever the reader is. Pimp, publisher, editor, querent, reader, arc reader, beta reader, rando consumer, 10 years later, whatever, human being. Authorial voice is somewhat built on the same skeleton as narrative voice. It's going to be the words you choose. It's going to be the sentences and how you write them. But now, instead of just having a story-driven purpose, I picked these words in these sentences to describe this image because it's part of my story. Now they're going to take on an additional dimension. So yeah, they're still narrative, but now it's narrative plus evidence that you, the author, made a decision. So maybe this is where we start to get a little abstract and I start to lose a few people. But ride with me here. You can do this. I believe in you. You got this. Here you go. So let's suppose we're describing something pretty straightforward. Let's suppose we're describing a glass of water. All right? Or maybe this now empty glass. Okay? We're going to describe the empty glass that's sitting on my desk. There are loads of different ways to do that. Those words you choose and how you organize them into sentences or a sentence or whatever, and how you punctuate that is narrative voice once it hits the page, because you wrote it. We just talked about that. But it's also authorial voice to some degree, because you had to choose to use those words and not other words. So if you want to call this glass, old, slightly fogged and cylindrical, because my old dishwasher was crap and my glass is ancient and it's all fogged at the top but clear on the bottom. However you choose to describe that glass, there were words you could have used that you didn't use, right? You made decisions. You were going to call this cylindrical as opposed to conical, right? You were going to call this a pint glass as opposed to a simple drinking vessel, right? You're going to make decisions. The evidence of those decisions, the proof you made those decisions, are the words that hit the page. But from the whole pool of words, you could have said that any number of ways. That decision is your authorial voice. It's the front door of authorial voice. It's the baseline of authorial voice, but it's authorial voice nonetheless. You chose how to describe the thing you're trying to describe. One of the most common editorial issues, one of the most common editorial comments from whether it's me or any other editor, even one of those people we talked about at the beginning, is what are you trying to say here? And that's where your decision-making process and your description they're not vibing. They're not clicking. You're trying to say X, but it's coming across like Y, and it doesn't really make sense. And we want it to make sense because we want the reader to understand what you're saying. So that evidence is critical because once you decide, okay, I'm going to describe it with 1, 2, 3 words, whatever they are, doesn't matter. But I'm not going to choose words 4, 5, and 6, whatever they are, doesn't matter. That decision-making process at its base helps distinguish your authorial voice because you're then saying, I'm somebody who's choosing words 1, 2, and 3, not 4, 5, and 6. From that ability, from that exercise of decision making, we can expand authorial voice. Because when we start talking about the meaning of things, the implications of things, the theme of things, all those deeper story structure-y bits, all of that stuff. And we're not even talking like, oh, well, why is the car blow up in chapter 10 and why is this plot twist here and what's this character's name? We're not even talking story architecture stuff. We're talking about the stuff beneath, where's my line? Beneath story structure stuff. All those abstract, hard to do writer things. They're a function of authorial voice. You make some decisions. You're choosing to describe your world in a certain way. You're choosing to say, well, in the world of my story, let's say you're writing a fantasy story, for instance. In the world of my story, there is a monarchy, and they're a complete dick to the workers. If someone were to go, hey, why is that your story? You might say, oh, well, this, when I was a little kid, I read these stories growing up, and it was very influential. That's fine. And that's still authorial voice because you're taking something you read before and you're bringing it forward. But maybe you're also saying, maybe, I don't know if you are, but maybe, well, I really think that monarchies are bullshit, and I'm trying to say something about them. You ever talk to a writer like that? I'm trying to say a thing about a thing. A theme. That's authorial voice. Thank you so much for subscribing. I really appreciate it. But that's authorial voice. I'm trying to say a thing about a thing. This glass of water doesn't only represent a promise made to an old cardiologist. It's a glass of water, and water is the gift of life, and water is the future currency of the planet, and water is clean and pure, and other adjectives used to describe water. And it's this thing John needs to chug a ton of because he's talking into a microphone for a while. I'm trying to say a thing about a thing. And I'm choosing to use words 1, 2, and 3, not words 4, 5, and 6. Because that's my authorial choice. Because that's my authorial voice. How I am now known and identified to describe a thing. How I want to choose to talk about stuff. The reason why I sound like me and I talk about the things I talk about and I connect the dots in terms of writing and structure and craft and marketing, but also over here with some social commentary and some politics and some other shit you as a human being need to be concerned about. The reason I bring all that shit together is voice. Because in my life, all these things come the hell together, and I think they should for everybody. It's my opportunity with this microphone and that camera and that light and this brain to come together and do a thing and say a thing. That's the point. That's authorial voice. You have one already. This isn't like I wrote this story and I can't figure out where the hell my voice is. It's on the page already. We're already there. Congratulations. You've done this hard thing. Now stop telling everybody you don't have one. Because you do. It's right there. It might not be as clear as you want. It might not be as strong as you want. But you have an authorial voice. And you have a narrative voice. So now our next interesting sort of marker, now that we've crossed from narrative to authorial and now from authorial forward, is that we go back to the story I told, where I'm sitting there sweating what other people are doing, trying to figure out, like, well, they're buying a goddamn house, and that guy just bought a boat, and like he's got 5,000 people on his newsletter, and he's selling a class that's way overpriced. But what do I have? I'm dodging the lawnscape guy because I owe him like $45. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna like feed myself in 4 days. Like I got other like I'm not buying a boat. I'm not selling a bullshit class about writing about writing a lengthy synopsis. That's all authorial voice. Going forward, we look at these things, we look at these comparisons, we look at this anxiety, this idea of, oh man, I don't know where I stack up compared to everybody else. And we start to freak out. And we start to say, well, other people have to be leagues ahead of me, way better than me, way more than me. Look at them. All they do is they talk about their accomplishments. And I'm over here just trying to rub two sticks together to get this page done. Or maybe we go the other way. Maybe we think to ourselves, well, we're doing all right. But we don't want to brag. We don't want to be selfish. We don't want to be arrogant. We don't want to step out of line. We want to stay coloring within those lines. We want to just do our thing and not rock the boat. Whatever boat there is, I don't fucking know. But we don't want to rock that boat. We just want to do our own thing, swim our own way. And we get our thing done, and we want that praise. We want that pride. And we're a little worried about where everybody else is, so maybe we pull back a little bit. Or maybe we're afraid to succeed. Maybe we've been 2 steps from the finish line for months now. And we just can't seem to edge our tootsies to the edge of the finish line. We just can't seem to take that next step forward. Or maybe we're afraid to start. Oh, I got this great idea, John. I got this amazing idea. And one day I'm going to write it down, and one day I'm going to hire you. When's that day happening, Chief? I mean, I got some free time on my calendar. You know what I'm saying? Like, when's this day? Like, I got a whole block of time. Maybe we're afraid to fail. So we sacrifice our voice. We trade our voice. If I do this, John, this could go bad. Somebody might find out I'm writing a book with boobs in it. Somebody might find out I like anime. Somebody might find out I wrote a story about a wizard. Somebody might find out that I had to use a pen name. Somebody might find out that I did a thing. Whatever. So I'm not gonna, because I'm afraid of what other people will think. That's the position I was in before. Welcome to the Tuck Your Shirt In Club. Welcome to the figure out how the hell you will fit in with everybody else. You never want to sacrifice your voice. Ever. Ever, ever. Because you'll never get it back. You give that up, it's gone. Gone. There's no way. If you deviate long enough, you're never going to get back to where you were. I'm not saying that like you shouldn't take time off way. I'm saying like, if you think you need to be a certain way or feel a certain way that isn't you, and you need to adopt these mannerisms, adopt this behavior, adopt this action, adopt this language, adopt this whatever, because you think that's what somebody in your position is supposed to do. To be a writer, I have to sound a particular way. To be published, I must leap through these hoops like a cavorting deer. To be, this, that, or the other, I have to be this, that, or the other thing. No! Don't trade who you are to get where you think you're supposed to be. Because when you get there to wherever it is you're supposed to be, you're going to want to be you. Also, you've got to be who you were meant to be. So if you're the author over there and you're writing, that's the wrong button, John. If you're the author over there and you're writing, hey, I'm writing this sci-fi story and this goes on and that goes on and then this shit blows up and there's a castle and a princess and blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is. And you like that. Own it. Write it to the best of your ability. Whatever it might be. That's your voice. You're the only one who can write that way. The only one. We could get 50,000 other human beings and give them all the same story points. We can give them your outline. We can give them everything. And every single one of them will write something different than what you wrote. Do you understand that? Like, do you see that distinction? Do you understand how singular your voice is? and how you need to be responsible for it. Voice is how you put your art into the world. Why on earth would you give that up? Why would you adopt somebody else's? How important is the idea of success to you that you're willing to give something of yourself up to get it? Really sit with that for a minute, because that's what I did. I had to sit with it. Did I really want to be that guy? Oh, I'm going to change my Twitter picture, and it's going to include this and this, because that's what 5 other people have. And then I'm going to use these buzzwords on a daily basis 3 or 4 times a day. And then I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to be more golly gee shucks, but I'm going to seriously mean it. Like, I can do that. I don't want to, so I'm not going to. The better you can line up your authorial voice with your narrative voice, the easier time you're going to have writing your work. And the clearer your authorial voice and the more effective your narrative voice is, the easier your work will advance forward in whatever process it's going to advance. Why? Why? Here we go. Here are the reasons why. Let's say you're going to go traditionally publish this thing. Who knows? Maybe you are. The more clear and effective your voice is, the more you stand out from how everybody else is writing, whatever it is you're writing, whatever genre it is, the better you're going to do. Because that's what people are looking for. They don't want, it's one more paint by numbers thriller. It's one more fantasy story with a rogue and a ranger with stubble, and somebody's got some bow and arrows, and then somebody goes off and does a thing. Yawn, stretch. Oh, there's a prophesied child and some sort of educational school magic system. Ooh. It's not the particular things that you have in your story that make your story stand out. Loads of people have a single protagonist. Loads of people are writing fantasy with multiple points of view. Loads of people are writing stories where the love interest is both half angel and half demon because it's, I guess, sexy to fuck something with wings and abs or something. I don't goddamn know. Ooh, whatever. But it's never those things that make your story stand out. Rare are the things, like rare foil Pokemon, are those things that make your story stand out on that level. What's going to make your story stand out on any level is how you get your story across, and that's your voice. The words you choose, how you choose to use them, the sentence structure, the paragraph, the word choice, what you choose to describe, how you don't choose to, you say this, but you don't say that. The points you make, the themes you have, all that decision making is what I'm talking about. That's your voice. That's what makes you stand out. Now, let's say we're coming over here to a different mode of publishing. Let's say you're going to go self-publish, right? Well, we've cut out a lot of that horse sense over here with the publisher and the pimp and all that shit. But now we're over here. We've got to go straight to the consumer. What's the consumer looking for? How about a book that isn't like all the other books on the shelf? Again, not because you've got this particular flavor of character, not because you have this many abs and that kind of troubled backstory and yet another prophecy with yet another child in it, but because of how you use those tools and how you get those words across and how you engage the reader. Different than how someone else engages the reader. That's your voice. You're the only one who can sound like you. You're the only one who can do these things. So, do them. Let's go to the next mile marker while I drink more water. All right, what's next on our vocal marathon? We've got 2 more flavors of voice, right? We talked about authorial and we talked about narrative. Now we're going to talk about strong voice and weak voice. These are things you might see in Twitter threads, Facebook posts, newsletters, from industry people speaking to people who want to break in or get into the industry or get published, right? This is from the mountain down to the people, if I might use a semi-biblical metaphor, okay? Strong voice and weak voice are the way your voice comes across, but not a measure of quality. This is where we get kind of confusing. I do not want you thinking that strong voice good, weak voice bad. No, not that. Not this. It's just it's more like shades of a color, light blue and dark blue. They're still blue, but we use them in different purposes for different functions. They're still there, but we don't inherently say that dark blue is worse than light blue or vice versa. They're just shades, different facets of voice. Strong voice is generally declarative. We're making very concrete statements. And this can be exposition, this can be dialogue, this can be description, this can be narration, this can be first person, third person, present tense, past tense, all that stuff. It's just when you are declaring a thing, when you're saying a thing is a certain way. Not just like, oh, that couch is blue. It's that, but it's also more than that. It's also the description of saying how a character feels, or talking about how urgently something feels. When you're declaring something and making it so for the reader, strong voice. You're going to use that sometimes when we want to definitely make sure the reader gets the idea, whatever the idea is. We want them to know X, so we declare it. We say it is this way. The character feels anxious. This is, the pan is hot because it's on the stove. Declarative, strong voice. Weak voice, the flip side of this, is when things are not explicitly declarative. I'm choosing my words carefully here because I want this to make sense to you. If strong voice is all about, Tom feels scared, declarative, strong voice. Weak voice takes the same idea of Tom being scared, but doesn't state it in a way where it's overtly declarative. Fear ran through Tom. Tom's still afraid, but now we phrased it differently. See what I did there? You see the distinction? Tom was scared versus fear ran through Tom. One is not inherently worse or better. One is also not inherently more simple than the other. They're just different. They're two different ways of expressing the same idea. We want to use strong voice when we want the reader to totally get a thing. We use weak voice when we want the reader to feel a thing. Now, sometimes we want them to feel that thing directly. Sometimes we want them in the ballpark of our feelings. Fear ran through Tom. The reader's going to see that and go, all right, so Tom's afraid, but to what degree afraid? And then they have to go to the next sentence and get more detail. We're putting them in the ballpark. We're putting them in a room with fear, and we're hoping they can find their way. It's different than we say, boom, bang, Tom is afraid. There's no confusion. There's no real wiggle room. There's no latitude. It just is that. John's got gray hair. The ice in my water melted. Declarative, strong voice. But if the ballpark I want to put you in is that it was previously warm in this room, I can talk about the fact that it was warm by pointing to the melted ice in my drink without ever saying how hot the room was explicitly. Weak voice is more about implication. It's more about sort of working around the thing you want to talk about so that the reader has to pick together context clues, this plus this plus this, to come across. Why would we use these things, you might be saying? I'll tell you exactly why. It is the combination of these two things that help give us an effective narrative voice. Sometimes we're coming at you strong. Sometimes we're coming in with like a feint, and then we come around the side or we sneak one in. To use a boxing term, sometimes we're going to come straight at you, and other times we're going to slip the jab and feint our way in. Sometimes it's a straight, sometimes it's a counter. These two things work together. We can't always just throw one thing, just like you can't always show or you just can't always tell. We're using a combination here. We're broadening our artist palette. We're adding more tools to the toolbox. Being able to know and being able to choose what sentence or what kind of idea is more effective in getting across your thought really helps. So let's say you're describing, I don't know. Let's say you're describing a romance novel, and let's say you want to make it clear for the reader to know how character A feels about character B. You probably want to use strong voice, maybe not exclusively, but frequently. Because you definitely want the reader to be able to go, okay, we're this far in the book, this is how character A feels about character B. But maybe leading up to that declaration, that final moment where they breathlessly look at each other and go, I love you. Building up to that, when the characters aren't so sure about how they feel, when they're kind of tap dancing around and they're kind of building for it, maybe we want to use some weak voice to talk about, well, the feelings are there and they're developing. And we don't want you thinking about the declaration of them, but we want you to think about those feelings in development. We'd use some weak voice. See how I got there? Combination. These sort of dualities, these kind of combinations for things, whether it's voice and narrative authorial, or strong and weak, or colors for description, which is something we'll talk about in a couple weeks, 2 weeks, I think it's on my list. Or in terms of marketing, which is what we're going to talk about next week. All those little things often work in pairs. And it can be really, here's a really important point. If you're ever finding a writing term, understand that it's probably not alone. There's probably some other element that hooks up with it to get the idea across. So if you're reading an article about show, somewhere there's an article about tell that kind of dovetails and interlocks. Sometimes they put them in the same article. Sometimes it's two separate. If you're going to talk about description, they're also going to talk about exposition. Things come in pairs because it's easy to understand concepts that way. And as long as you remember that these things are not diametrically opposed, they're just two things that work together as a single whole, you'll be fine. Now, I want to wrap us up here. We're moving pretty quickly. This is, as I said at the beginning, we might go a little shorter tonight, but I want to wrap us up now with some real crunchy practical stuff. We talked about how everybody wants a really clear, effective voice, right? And we talked about how publishers of all different flavors and consumers of all different stripes want your stuff to stand out. And it is important that they stand out on more than just the contents. Oh, you have people who transform into horses. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a thing. But that's not enough to really be a selling point by itself unless you're way into horses. And yeah, there are some people who are way into horses in that awkward, uncomfortable way. But by and large, it's not enough to encourage the sale of, buying a book, right? You wouldn't just pick it up. Oh shit, it's horses. There's more to it. There needs to be more to it. There's also a great deal of doubt when it comes to voice. So I want to talk about how to fix these things. What common issues do I see? How do we make them better? How do you get better at it? So let's just run down a few and then we'll get out of here. All right. Problem number 1 with voice. Biggest problem is that the author tries to adopt a voice and therefore a writing style that is not their own. Usually this is because they have some kind of expectation that the kind of story they're telling, the kind of genre they're in, the kind of book they're trying to make has to sound or feel a certain way. Oh, I'm writing a gothic horror story, so it has to sound slightly, 1800s and European. No, it doesn't. You don't have to do that. You can, but you don't have to. Or you might go, oh, I'm writing a science fiction story and it's a big deal and people are doing all this kind of stuff and it's part of a whole big universe. So I have to write it in this big, wild Star Wars-y or Star Trek-y way. No, again, you can, but you don't have to. This is significant because if you start adopting the trappings that don't fit your voice and you double down on them because you think, oh, well, if I just keep doing it, it'll eventually fit. It won't. It'll just be worse. It'll just compound all its problems. Now, some people hear me say that and they think I'm talking about the fact that they have to write the way they speak with all the ums and uhs and slang and fragments and poor punctuation and the lack of description or the lack of connective tissue. They can just fire off a stream of consciousness and put it on the page and call it a day. To be very super clear, that is not at all what I'm talking about. And if that's what you're doing, knock it off, because it's just not it. What I'm talking about is that for whatever you're writing, no matter what it is, no matter what genre it is, whatever, there is a way you will sound the most authentic and relatable to whomever, not just one specific person that you picture in your head when you're sitting down and writing, but just to the widest breadth of human population possible. You will encounter a level of congruence. This feels good. It feels good to write, and it feels good to read, and it makes sense, and the story flows, and it comes out of your brain slightly less with less difficulty overall. That's the sentence I'm stumbling through. It's easier to write, and it's smoother to read, and you're making some, fewer of the mistakes you were previously making. You're probably still making some. This is not about perfection. But maybe instead of having to worry about your sentences starting over and over with the same word, or your paragraphs all being the same size, because you're more in that sort of very usual nice flow and structure of things. I got this going on, I got that going on. I'm hitting on all my cylinders. I'm really firing along. It's going to sound like you. It's going to sound like the way you want it to. It's going to come across clearly. It's going to be effective. That's the thing. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to be in that sweet spot as much as possible. Now, can you be there the entire time? Probably. Is it realistic to assume that? No. But it's possible. But you want to get there as frequently as possible. Now, that does not mean it's because you wore certain pants on a certain day, or because you put your coffee cup in a certain spot, or because you had this music playing, or because the sun was over here with this, and that has nothing to do with all that shit. It has everything to do with you getting out of your own way mentally. Now, if you want to attribute that relaxation and focus and discipline to something external from you and, giving yourself the chance to be successful, that's on you. That's not my thing to police or deal with or organize or unfuck. That's on you. But you have to get out of your own way. If you want your voice to come through and you want your voice to be authentic, you have to get out of your own way. I don't care if you got to take 2 edibles and then sit down and write your shit. I don't give a shit. Do whatever you got to do. I don't care if you got to walk in a circle 3 times and spit on the ground before you write dialogue. Do whatever you got to do to get the best story out of your brain and onto the page. Also, if you're bogarting all the editables, what the hell? Share with the rest of us. But anyway, the point here is that by adopting a voice that is incongruent with your sort of more native writing style and your more native construction, you are going to have a harder time getting out of your way. And it's going to come across in your text as halting or awkward or stiff or pretentious. And you're going to end up needing to deeply scrub that out of your work. And that means coming to terms on some level with the fact that you have an unreasonable expectation about how a book is supposed to be. And you may also have a partnering expectation about how you should be as an author. You see this a lot. I see this a lot. Where you have people who get into a position where they think as a writer they're supposed to engage in things a certain way and sound a certain way so that they're good enough. And none of that shit's true. None of it. You sound how you sound. You say what you say. It's authentic to you and you own it unapologetically. In short, you be who you are meant to be. That's issue and fix number 1. You get out of your own way. Issue number 2. Your voice kind of comes in and out, like a radio station in a long drive, or a light bulb that's slowly giving up, before we switch bulbs. This comes in part from getting in your own way. Usually this comes as a result of getting terrible feedback or reading something on the internet. That's a really common thing I encounter. John, I saw this on the internet. I read this article. I saw this Twitter thread. I read this thing on Facebook. I heard from two people talking. There was, this happened. And they end up down this detour of bullshit writing advice. Oh, I thought it was a bad idea to do that thing. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, I heard 3 people who allegedly did a thing said this, and therefore it must be true. They have no certification for this. They didn't do any research. They didn't sit down and run a rigorous scientific study. They just heard about it on the internet and decided to do it. And the impact that has on their work, they were going along just fine until all of a sudden they weren't. If you're looking for a non-writing example of this, I'm going to point to Charles Barkley playing golf. If you've never seen Charles Barkley playing golf, he is notorious for one of the weirdest / worst golf swings ever. Ever. And it's because, in part, he didn't really learn any effective mechanics for it. And 2, anytime somebody was like, hey, Charles, you need help with your swing, everybody gave him different advice, and he tried to incorporate it all. You're going to go out there on the internet. You're going to go hang out on social media. You're going to encounter a load and loads of people all trying to do the same thing you're doing. And they're all going to tell you that the shit that works for them is the one true way you're supposed to do it. And they're all fucking wrong. There's a billion different ways to do this. None of them are better than the others. They're just different. It's sort of like arguing about flowers in a garden. They're all flowers. That one's not necessarily a better flower just because it's a slightly different shade of whatever color it is. They're all flowers. There's a million different ways to do this. Advice on the internet should be tested. And if it works for you, use it. And if not, don't. And just because people are talking about it on the internet doesn't mean you need to immediately incorporate it into your book. That's just stepping you away from your voice rather than stepping you into your voice. The most common fix for that, stop reading shit on the internet. Stop trying to apply everybody's specific advice. Stop trying to, do what everybody says. Stop trying to just write your thing. Just write your thing. Just write your thing. And it's going to be just fine. It's going to be just fine. Just keep doing. Just keep writing. Write it badly and then figure it out over the course of drafts. That's the point. Next fix. I got this and then one more after it, and then we're out. So about 10 more minutes? Okay, next fix. You have a voice that's strong with some characters. This is particularly true if you've got more than one point of view character. You've got a voice that's clear with one character and a voice that is substantially less clear with another character. Sometimes that divide is along gender lines if you're writing like a hetero romance. Sometimes that divide is based on some other binary, whether that's race or activity or class or experience. You're able to say that for whatever reason or reasons, you are more comfortable writing this character than that character. This is where things get a little dicey because sometimes, but not always, it's often in your better interest to collapse the story down to one point of view. Some stories work better that way. Not all of them. It's not a blanket statement. Don't take it as one. But understand that that is a possible solution. If you were really good at one voice and utter dog shit in another, stop doing the bad one. Play to your strengths. That's a solution. Other solutions include working specifically and primarily with the voice you're not strong with, the character you're not great at sounding like, probably because they're either very similar to you or very different from you. So you're either having to confront yourself and it's making you uncomfortable, or they're way outside your experience and it's making you uncomfortable. Working with them first and foremost to dial that in and straighten that out and make that work. And that usually means really taking apart what they're doing, how they're doing it, what their arc is, what their construction is, what their goals are, what their skills are, how they're coming across on the page. And it's a combination of both story architecture, but also your narrative voice. See how these things start to weave together? You do that for the one that doesn't work, and you spend more time there and try to balance it. You do not say, oh, well, the first voice is really good and the second one's really ugh, so I'm going to drop the quality on the first one to sort of even. No. If one voice is fine, leave it alone. Stop tinkering with it. Go work on the thing that doesn't work. Don't broke what ain't fix, as somebody once yelled at me. If it's working, leave it alone. It's fine. You might not be able to raise the quality of that second voice and that second narrative and that second point of view character up to that level, but we can certainly improve it from utter garbage to something better than garbage. It just takes time and focus and organization. Okay? One more voice thing. Let's move away from drafting and talk about voice and marketing. In part because this is a very clever teaser for what's coming next week, and in part because it's a real important thing that you need to think about in and out of your story. How you come across to the other people, whomever they might be. I don't care whether they are industry professionals or members of the hashtag writing community or, I don't know, the 5 random jamooks you see every Thursday. How you come across to them, how you talk about your work, how you talk about your frustration, how you talk about your feelings, how you talk about your successes, how you talk about your endeavors, how you plan your things, how you lay your things out, what you share, what you don't share, how you share it with them, all that stuff, the concerns you have, the fears you have, all that stuff. Every single part of it markets you. Now, I'm not saying that to freak you out. I'm not saying that to be like, hey, mind all your P's and Q's and don't do anything. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not even close. I'm just telling you that there is going to be, just like there's an authorial voice in terms of the context of what you want to say and how you want to say it, there's the same authorial voice also is, based in or works with or is rooted in how you get that stuff across. How you are you and how you communicate your you-ness. Can we go with that? How you come across to other people when talking about your work as work in a big global piece, as opposed to, hi, in my story in chapter 8, I did this, and that. Thinking about your work as a product, thinking about your effort as part of a long-term career, even if it's a side hustle, even if it's this thing you're doing, well, we've also got this other shit going on, whatever. It's all marketing. And the more frequently you can align that authorial voice with clarity of message. So you're you and you don't apologize for it. You are, in short, who you are meant to be. Assuming your marketing structure isn't like way off base, as long as it's well crafted, as long as the sentences are effective, your marketing will inherently do better. There will be a level of authenticity and naturalness that comes across to it, no matter what it is we're selling, whether we're talking about, hey, here's my small business. Hey, here's my 3 books. Hey, here's my 1 book. Hey, hi, this is my query letter. Somebody please represent me. Hey, you should come check out my author page. Hey, check me out on this thing. Whatever it is. Line yourself up with your idea, and you will do a hell of a lot better because you won't be working uphill against yourself. And it all comes down to figuring out how you want to sound. How do you want to say whatever it is you want to say? How do you feel about what it is you want to say? Why do you feel the way you feel about what you want to say? Oh, I think an author should sound like this. X. Why? Is that easy for you? If so, great, do it. Is that difficult? Do you find yourself really forcing yourself to get there? Why? Is it possible that that's not the best decision for you? Is that something you could possibly examine? Every time I write, I have the hardest time wrapping this thing up. Okay, so is the technique a problem or is the idea the problem? If so, how can we play to your strengths? If you don't know what your strengths are, if you're sitting here listening to this going, John, this is all well and good, but I don't even know what I do well. Okay, that's legit. Go get help. Ask an editor, find a writing coach, talk to another human being and see if they can point out positives in your work, not blow smoke up your ass, but legit tell you like, oh, you did this really well. You do that really well. You need some positive there. But you got to figure out how you want to sound and how you want to come across. And you can, once you get a base of that, you can learn when to be more aggressive with it, when to be more assertive with it. It's not bad and wrong to do those things. You're going to need to be assertive and aggressive and forthright and honest and unapologetic, because the goal is to be who you are meant to be. And as an author, that's everything. It isn't just that, oh, well, my book has angels and demons and robot ducks. Great. I'm very happy for you. 25 other people today had books about angels and demons. What makes yours stand out other than your name on it? How you communicate, how you broadcast your art into the world is what matters. Don't run from that. Embrace it. Practice it. You're going to suck at it, okay? This is going to feel weird and a little vulnerable and kind of naked in maybe a fun way, but maybe not a fun way for some people. And that's all right. Get comfortable in that spot, because in that spot, you'll be able to generate outward and do more and make more, because it does get easier over time. Don't run away from it. Don't try to Don't try to adopt the trappings of how you think it's supposed to be. You're in charge of how it is, so you get to make it the way you want it to be. And then following that, you get to make it however it is the best you can. That's why we have that distinction between first drafts and second draft. The first draft is just to get it out of your brain and get it on the page, and it can be garbage and it can be awful. But then going forward from the second draft on, we get to make it better. We get to figure it out. We get to find out how you can take this idea and shape it into the best form it can be. But that's all voice. If you're listening to this, if you've made it all the way through this and you're just now realizing like, John, I'm still in my first draft. What the hell do I do? Go finish your first draft. That does not mean this stuff doesn't apply to you, but please don't like make this a hill you'll die on. Go finish your first draft first. Your voice is already there. It's going to be okay. In later drafts, you can learn how to strengthen it and bring it out and promote it. If you're doing a second draft or a third draft, it's time to put that voice front and center. In addition to strong, effective prose, in addition to strong, effective word choice to get the contents of the story across, your voice needs to come through as well to see how you present that story to the world. And if you're like on draft 6 or more, why haven't you just come talk to me? Why haven't we sat down for 30 minutes and figured out what the hell's holding you back and how we can get past it? Because if you're doing like double, triple digit drafts, there's something going on and you probably need some help. And I'd be more than happy to help you. I'm looking at my notes to make sure I got everything. Yes. That's voice. That's absolutely voice. That is the most articulate and clearest way I can say voice based on what I know right now. Now, you ask me this later this week, maybe voice shows up more in the writer's chat coming this Wednesday. Who knows? You'll have to tune in and find out. And maybe my answers will change, or maybe my answers won't change. Who knows? But voice is one of those things that is important to an author, not because it just comes down to how you make a scene. Like, how do you write an action scene? That's voice tangentially. But voice is one of those first big abstract hurdles in creativity. What are you trying to say, and how are you trying to say it? And it's from that point that we want to have this discussion. And it's from that point that we want to develop and do more with it. Because once you own your voice, and once you know what your voice is and know what your voice isn't, you're able to sit there 2 and 3 days later after you're totally freaked out that you're not going to be able to like make it through the day and not going to have a business anymore, and you're totally worried about everything. You suddenly turn and go, I don't want to sound like those jackholes. Fuck them. They wouldn't, come lend me a hand. They'd tell me all the things I'm doing wrong. So why would I want to be like that when I could be like me? It's just easier to be who you are meant to be. And that's everything. That's the ball game. So let's get out of here. I want to thank everybody for checking this out. Thank you so much for being so gracious and welcoming me back. It's nice to be back. It was great to be here. The next time I will talk to you will be on Wednesday. I said January. I don't know why I wanted to say January. Wednesday, June 8th. So it's 2 days from now. At 7 p.m., I'll be right back here for the Writer's Chat. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for checking this out. If you liked this, if this was great and helpful for you, the two best things you can do are, one, if you're watching this on YouTube, go like and subscribe. If you haven't already, give me a thumbs up, all that good shit. And if you really, really like this and you really, really want to see more of this, go check out patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate, because $2 a month will absolutely positively help make way more of these things happen. And if even after that, if you decide, hey, I want to get really better at this and you're really serious about it, jump over to writernextdoor.com, go book a free appointment, and I will be more than happy to tell you how you can succeed at whatever it is you're doing. So, with that all said, all that stuff covered, big deep breath. I'll talk to you guys on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, right back here for the Writer's Chat. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. See ya.